All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Baylie Albus, and I am a museum educator at the National World War II Museum. And today we have the first part of a two-part series webinar that we're going to share with you, taken from an electronic field trip that we did some years ago, all about the home front and what life was like for civilians, the folks that were not fighting in the military overseas or on U.S. soil, and what they did to help with the war effort. And we also get to hear from some volunteers who were alive during World War II and were kids during World War II. So while we are getting that ready, just to let you guys know, we are recording this. So if you have any questions, you can certainly submit them and we'll have museum educators answer them as we get them. And after we show this short video, we'll go through some resources that we have that you can use either at home with your kids, or if you're a teacher, you're welcome to share those with students through your digital learning platforms. After we go through those, I have a couple of questions that I received prior to the recording of this, and I'll answer those. So in the meantime, I'm going to pass it off to Chrissy and our student reporters, and let's hear from them.
All right, guys, right now we are in the museum's vault, where we house some of the museum's 160,000 artifacts we have in our collection. Just a little bit of those are actually on view here at the museum. Now, being in a museum that's totally dedicated to history, and you all study for history for years and years in school, we all know that history is important, right? But why is it important?
So we learn from our mistakes and we don't repeat them.
But also to learn from the good things that happened in the past, so we can repeat them.
Well, history also shows how much has happened over the years.
Yeah, and I think you guys are all correct on that, but I'm going to add one more point. History is full of the best stories ever told, and on whatever topic that you really enjoy, whether it's art, music, war, sports, movies, science, you name it. There's a history of that certain topic. And if you research it and study it and learn all about it, it'll enhance your enjoyment of that topic. Another question for you all. So we know history is important, but what is history exactly?
Oh, history is what had happened in the past.
So what you ate for breakfast, is that history?
No, I guess so.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one, right? So history actually is not just the past. It's the study of the past. If no one writes about it or researches or studies it, then it's just the past. It's not history, technically. One more kind of tough question for you all. So, we use different kinds of materials to discover the past. What kind of materials could those be to learn all about the past?
Well, like all the stuff you have here in the vault.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so all this stuff, whether it's letters or manuscripts, diaries, uniforms, we've got leather saddles above us, all these kinds of things. Yes. What do we call those things in school?
Primary sources.
Yeah, you got it. Primary sources. What are primary sources? What do they do?
Well, there are certain things that were created in the past that we're used to studying.
Exactly. Primary sources help enhance our understanding of that certain time period of an event in the past. Now, here's kind of a cool thing. Sometimes the best primary sources are living people.
People can be primary sources?
Yeah, people can be primary sources. If they witnessed or experienced an event in history and tell about it, yeah, that's definitely a primary source. And since World War II, in the grand scheme of things, wasn't that long ago in history, 70, 75 years ago, sometimes, as I said, the best primary sources are the people who live them, and they're still alive today.
One exhibit at the National World War II Museum is all about the home front. It explains how the people who were home in America during the war, including kids, kept informed about the war and about how they could do things to help in the war effort. Museum volunteer Joyce Dunn was in elementary school when the war started. When the Japanese attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor, America was suddenly at war. What do you remember about that day?
Oh, I remember it so much. My mother had the radio on, and I'll never forget that day when she looked and said, "We're at war, Pearl Harbor has been bombed." She told us that was part of America that was bombed.
During World War II, 42 million kids were on Homefront. What was it like for kids back then?
Well, one thing we did was we could write our relatives who were in the war. And I can remember vividly writing these V-mails to my uncle and also to my cousin. And that meant a lot to them that they would receive mail from us.
When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, I understand that everything changed. What type of things changed?
Quite a bit changed. First of all, the food we could eat, everything was rationed. My mother would have to go get a ration book, and that was the main concern about the food and the ration.
Everything changed, including pennies. As I see here, instead of copper pennies, back then you used steel pennies.
That's right, because copper was really needed, a commodity for the war, because it was used for wiring. It conducts electricity, and it was very important. So copper was no longer used in 1943. The government found a way to use steel pennies. You see right here, I have a steel penny, and if you notice, it's magnetic. And if we had a copper penny, I could show you that it wouldn't be magnetic. Oh, you have one in your pocket.
Penny right here.
Yes, you see? Okay, and then if you try and use it, it doesn't stick because it is not magnetic like the steel. And that is the reason why in 1943 the government changed to the steel penny in order to save the copper.
During World War II, I understand that there was no TV, no internet, no video games. So what did you use to get all your information?
Well, first of all, we used the newsreel at the movie theater, but also they had wall posters all around. They called them propaganda posters. And these posters were made to unite us.
Because so much equipment had to be made, and so many men who worked in the factories were now fighting in the war, the government called on women to take their place. They were given a special nickname. What about the famous propaganda poster about Rosie the Riveter?
Well, you see, during the war, the men went off, and so they needed someone to service and make the tanks and make everything. And so what happened, the women went to war at home, and it was known as Rosie the Riveter.
This little girl looks like she would be the same age as you during World War II, Miss Joyce. Why does she have a teapot, a bicycle tire, and shoes?
The reason why we were scrapping during the war, and you've noticed rubber from the shoes, and all these things were sent to help the war. There was also fat. When you fry bacon or other things, the fat would go in here. Your mom or your dad would take this to the butcher, and then they would send it to a certain place, and they would use it for glycerin or nitroglycerin later on. So this was very important, the fats during the war, because they were used very much for ammunition.
Bacon fat was used to make bombs?
Absolutely. Isn't that strange? But it was a very important part of the home front. These are the things we did to help the war.
Another way to help out was buying war stamps?
Oh, yes. This was very important during the war.
How do these stamps work?
Well, Chris, this is how it did. And this is a war bond book. For 10 cents, you'd fill in every blank. And when the pages were filled, it was $18.70. And then you turn it in and you get a $25 war bond. The savings bond was so essential because just think of all the tanks, the airplanes, everything that was needed during the war. And so how did we get the money? War bonds. All the money that were collected from these bonds were used so that we could fight the war and win.
Thanks, Ms. Joyce. You've helped us all understand how even folks on the home front, including kids like me, helped win the war and how we were all in this together.
Well, Chris, it's been my pleasure, and I think it's very important that children of your age remember how it was in those early days, because that was the war that really changed the 20th century, and here we are free, and a lot of men and women died for our freedom. So we should always remember that.
All right, guys, welcome back. I love that video. I love hearing from our volunteers. So now I'm going to go ahead and share our resource packet with you and kind of briefly walk you through it and tell you a little bit more about what we're offering. So first, in relation to Chrissy talking about how the foundation of history is really based in the stories that we hear from people. So we have shared some elementary friendly books that are based around World War II topics, some of our favorites. We've written down the recommended grade level that you can use them with, but of course, I'm all about reading storybooks until you're grown. So I think any grade level is really good for these, but some of them are for a little bit older kids. And we've covered topics that we basically cover in the museum and in our artifacts and exhibits. So we've given the Homefront, Japanese incarceration, European theater, and Pacific theater. We've also provided links to where you can find these books for purchase through their publishers and through other places. I'm sure you can find them as well. Miss Joyce, our wonderful museum volunteer, also talked specifically about how she used Victory Mail or V-Mail, and how that was used during her time and how she had to write with them. So we have a quick little brief overview of what V-Mail is and how it was used. So they were basically given a really small piece of paper where they had to write a letter to someone. And so you're given just a little bit of space. So I consider that kind of like what our Twitter is like these days. So you're only given so many characters, and you have to be really concise, and you have to think about what you're writing and how you're writing it so that you can get your message across with just a little bit of space. So once they were written on those pieces of paper, they actually took pictures of them. They were put on film, and then they were mailed overseas to soldiers. And that meant that you went from having tons of mail bags that you were sending to maybe just one mail bag full of thousands of letters. Once they received them overseas, they would blow up those pictures again and send them off to their recipients. So a little extra thing to our V-Mail write-up is also a template for V-Mail. So we encourage you at home to either try this out with writing to a family member, writing to a friend, just using the space below. So you really have to think about what you're writing and maybe even how small or how big you're writing. So that's all for you to try out. And then last but not least, Miss Joyce also mentioned how we received news during World War II. So that news was either through newsreels in theaters or through propaganda posters. So we have some propaganda poster coloring sheets that you guys can try at home, featuring our very favorite riveter, Miss Rosie Riveter. And then we also have one about production and rationing, how you ration at home so that soldiers overseas can have what they need. And then last but not least, we have our Of Course I Can propaganda poster. So encouraging folks to can those vegetables that they were growing in their victory gardens and using them for later. So all of these resources are available. They're included in the chat in our webinar, as well as all of our social media platforms. They'll be available on our Twitter, our Facebook page, and last but not least on our website. So you have free access to that. You're welcome to download it and enjoy it from there. And we have just a couple of questions that we received before getting this started. So I'm going to read those questions and answer them very briefly. So this one comes from Kate in North Carolina. So what does V-Mail mean? And I very briefly said it was Victory Mail. So that victory campaign was actually something that was started by Winston Churchill, the V for Victory campaign. That's really where our peace sign started. He was doing a V sign. And it really united all of the Allied fronts towards one goal, towards one image of victory. So they started putting out posters all about victory, how everything that you did towards the war effort was so that we could get towards that victory. So we had victory gardens, we had Victory Mail. They even had board games called, I have a Victo Bingo. So it's a VICTO, and then some different categories that you can pull from and get. So a whole board game about victory. And of course, I'm sure everyone's seen victory pins, little pins that people would wear that say V for victory. So it all comes from that phrase of V for victory. So Victory Mail. And then we have one more question from Matthew in Louisiana. And it's a great question. What is a riveter? So we always talk about Rosie the Riveter and how riveters were used during World War II. So it's basically a way to keep two pieces of metal together, and it's someone that uses the equipment to rivet machinery. So Rosie the Riveter was a riveter because she used a riveter gun to put a bolt through two pieces of metal and connect them. So I am going to check and see if we have any other questions that we want to try to answer. It looks like we don't. But if you guys think of anything at all, you are welcome to post those questions to Facebook. Our museum educators are standing by to answer any questions that you might have. And we'll be back again tomorrow for the second half of this wonderful webinar. So we'll cover the rest of the Homefront and show you a few more videos, answer a few questions, and share one more resource packet with you. I hope everybody is staying sane and staying healthy. And we'll be back with you guys again tomorrow. See you later.